Amen. Have a seat. Thank you, Katie and team. Every week they come here early, they set up, they sing on a lack of sleep as well, right? Who's well rested? Yeah? Who's tired? Raise your hand. Perfect. Here, this is for you this morning. Just, you get two now. Double fisting right there, huh? It's going to be a party today. So, hey, they're actually going to stay in here today. Yeah, they are forced to stay in here. Bluebridge 56, you're going to be miserable today. Yep, give it up for them, huh? Yeah. We love the next generation. No. Hey, I'm so pumped to be here today. If you don't know me, my name is Troy. I'm on the teaching team here at Bluebridge. I gotta be honest with you today. I'm going to tell a story that my dad doesn't know about, that my mother-in-law doesn't know about, and my wife doesn't know about. So at the end of this, I could be in some big trouble. Yeah, it's going to be fun, okay? So to my mother-in-law, you're not my real mom, so you can't judge me for this story, okay? To my dad, I don't live with you anymore, so like MC Hammer, you can't touch this. And to my wife, I love you, okay? So this goes back to my college days. It's really not that bad. I don't want to set you up for like something really cool. But going back to my college days, I was taking a class called Communications 101. No idea what the class was about. Okay, it was about communications. I don't know what the point of it was. But at this time, I was playing baseball and at the school, and we had a really busy schedule as baseball players, right? You got to feel bad for college athletes because they have to work really hard in life. And my schedule was 6 a.m., weights, conditioning, go to class for a few hours, and then hit the field, and you're getting home at 6 p.m. every night, okay? And so with that, you get really busy, and you forget the student part, right? Because everyone's going to go pro. Well, then you factor in the season comes along, and now you have 2 doubleheaders a week, Wednesday nights and Saturdays, so you're not getting home until after 9 o'clock on Wednesdays, and then your Saturday's gone because you're at the field all day long. And so by the time you get home, you don't want to study, right? I mean, who does that these days? And so here I am, spring quarter, the season is underway. Our team have worked all fall, all winter. The season is here for baseball, and we're excited. So it's getting towards the end of the season, and I was in this class, Communications 101, with about 6 of my teammates. And we had found a friend prior who took the class a couple quarters before us, and there's this big final project that's due every year during the finals. And for my Bluebridge 56 people, don't ever do this. Okay? And so, or anyone in general in school, don't ever do this. And so we had this idea, hey, we can just borrow her project and then just change some stuff and then turn it in and we're good and we don't have to, now we can save all that time to not study, right? Isn't that just like a really like moral thing to do? Yeah, yep, no, okay, perfect. So here I am, we get this project, and so what we do is we do the smart thing. We change up pretty much everything that's in there. It just saves us time because we just got to, put our stuff in. And so one of my roommates actually failed. He thought he could just change his name at the top of the paper and turn that paper in. But here's the catch. The person that wrote that paper was a female. So there was a lot of like woman verbiage in there that when the teacher went to read it, could tell something isn't right here. And then he started noticing kind of a theme in 5 other papers that kind of followed the same kind of format. And then he realized, oh, these are 6 baseball players. And so one day we're out at practice, and we're working hard, and all of a sudden we see the dean of the school walking towards the field. And he never comes out to the field because he doesn't even like us, okay? And so we know something's up. And he pulls our coach aside, and immediately this guilt inside me is like, oh, my goodness. It's us. Like, I'm done. There's words I started thinking that I can't say up here, okay? And so, sure enough, coach comes back out, calls us 6 over, and I'm like, I am, literally, anyways. So he gets in front of us and says, hey, you need to go talk with the dean. And so we're walking, and none of us are saying a word. Long story short, we got in big trouble. We had to do a lot of community service. We could have got kicked out of school, but we didn't. And that teacher, for the rest of the quarter, there's only a few weeks left, he wouldn't make eye contact with us. I couldn't even look at him because I felt like the biggest loser because, like, man, this is the easiest class in the world. You don't have to do anything. I tried to cheat. So Moral of the story, don't cheat. It's not good. But I only feel guilty, let's be honest, because I got caught. I wouldn't be telling this story today if I never got caught, right? So let me tell you another story that has to do with baseball that I did catch myself in, and we were just doing normal drills, and there was one time where we had to, really focus in on something so we could practice advancing from one base to the next on a ball that would hit the dirt so we could, advance the runner. If you know baseball, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, bear with me. And there was one time we're practicing it in practice, and I just lost focus. I wasn't paying attention, and my coach just calls me out in front of the whole team. And I did what every good athlete should do. I just said, yes, sir. No, I don't know what got into me that day. I snapped at my coach in front of the whole team. And he just stood there like in shock because that was not who I was, and he just let it go. And I remember I felt so guilty by the end of that practice that I had to get up in front of the whole team and say, hey, fellas, that wasn't cool. That's not what we do here, because I was looked at as one of the leaders, and so I wanted to set the example. So that was an example of I felt guilty, I needed to fix it, I owned it, and moved on. And then here's the big one. Has anyone here ever snapped at their dad, mom, or spouse? Raise your hand. Perfect. Guess what you get? You get a Snickers bar because, anyone here ever get hangry? Yeah. So my wife can attest that I get hangry a lot. I'm borderline hangry right now, so this might get real interesting. I might start throwing other things next. Okay. So you owe me $1, by the way, because I had to pay for that. And yeah. So anyways, so here I am. You get hangry. You snap at your wife. You're tired. And I remember my wife always looks at me like, why'd you do that? Sometimes she tears up, and I'm like, wow, I'm a horrible person. And I just feel extremely guilty. So what do? I run away and come back when she falls asleep, and then we're good the next day. No, I don't do that. I just want to see if you're listening. No. We take care of it. Sometimes it goes better than other times, but yeah, here we go. So today, let me talk about guilt. So I talked about guilt that you get caught in. I talked about guilt that you own. And I talk about guilt that, is also self-imposed, right? And guilt can lead to a lot of different things. It can lead to insecurity, right? Which we all know what happens with insecurity. Lies begin to form inside of us when we start letting these insecurities take over who we are. We begin to lose focus. So I talked about losing focus at one of my practices, and it cost me. I got called out in front of the whole team. Right? So when we are guilty of something, we tend to take our focus off things, and we tend to start focusing on the wrong things because there's that guilt there that is going to fester and only grow. Or we begin to lie. So, the easy way for us doing our paper was we could have just lied, but we were caught red-handed in college, right? There's no way around it. And so lies begin to build upon lies. If you guys have kids here, you guys know what I'm talking about. You get caught in a lie, and then to get out of that lie, you lie again, right? Or let's go back to the beginning. Let's think of Adam and Eve, right? The people that we love to pick on the most. She ate the fruit. We blame, right? Adam gets to say, no, she did it. Or we start to have a lack of trust. We run and hide, just like Adam and Eve did, right? Or we do exactly what they did. We become feeling ashamed or almost feel gross about ourselves, which leads to us wanting to go and cover ourselves up with something in our lives. For Adam and Eve, it was fig trees. But more importantly, the scariest thing about guilt is it leads to the most dangerous thing out there, and that is this: you quit. So instead of starting fast and ending strong, you start fast, crisis arrives, and then you quit. And that leads today to right into what we want to talk about, what we've been talking about for several weeks now. We've been focusing on the fruits of the Spirit. All right? Paul talks about it in Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23. He lists them out: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, which I talked about last week, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And if you were here last week, I ended the day by talking about the verses out of Titus 3:8. And I talked about, and this is what it says in Titus 3:8. Devoting ourselves to doing what is good. So getting to a place in our lives where we are fully devoted every single day, every single moment to doing what is good. You see, here's the reality of where we are as a world. And I touched on this briefly last week as well, is the world needs more loyal people. The world needs more relationships that are committed, friendships, marriages, whatever. They need us to be more dependable than ever. And as a church, we talk about Blue Bridge, that's why we're here. We need these fruits to be able to do what we are set out to do, and that is help, love, grow, and serve the people in our homes, our neighbors, our work, our community. We need these fruits of the Spirit. At the end of the day, the world needs more finishers. We are really good at starting as a culture, but we are terrible finishers. And for us to truly separate ourselves from culture, we need to learn to finish. And that takes me into today's fruit of the Spirit, which is faithfulness. And I want to talk a little bit about the root of faithfulness. Now, faithfulness is, we can go a million different ways with it, but here's where I want to go today. I want to list out some things that when I hear the word faithfulness, this is what I think of. I think of in it for the long haul, right? We're talking about finishing, so we're in it for the long haul. I think of being dependable. I think of extreme loyalty. I think of commitment, determination, perseverance, discipline, generosity, and more importantly, humility. You see, being faithful is being someone that can be counted on, relied upon all of the time, whether you're in crisis or whether you're in celebration. That's what it means to be faithful. Being someone that can be trusted, not just with the big things, because that's easy, right? But what about with the small things? The everyday things. And that brings me to where I want to focus today on, and that's on the story of a small part of Moses' life. So if you have your Bible on your phone, or if you want to grab a Bible that we provide, we're going to primarily be in the book of Numbers today. We're going to be jumping around between Numbers 11 and chapter 16, and I'll do my best to let you know where we're at. But before we get that far, some of you guys may be familiar with Moses. You've all seen the Prince of Egypt, I'm sure. You've seen the many different messages on Moses. I mean, Moses' life is so extraordinary. You can do a year-long sermon series on just Moses, right? And so before I jump into Numbers, I want to backtrack to Exodus when I feel like Moses, for the first time, hit guilt like never before in his life. And it happens in chapter 2, verses 11 through 15 of Exodus. And it's where he murdered somebody, right? So this is way fast forward to the story of Moses. He was, saved by the kingdom that wanted him to die because they knew of the prophecy of a little Hebrew boy that was one day going to be risen up to take down Egypt and free the Israelites. And so Egypt, wanted to kill all the firstborn, and they tried, and, you can read the story. But today I want to focus more on in Numbers, where it's later on in his life, where he's already gotten the Israelites out of Egypt, and now he's in the desert with them, and they're on their way to the promised land, okay? And so here's Moses, after he's murdered someone, before he ever gets the Israelites out, guilt drove him out of his comfort zone. So Moses gets a little bit older and starts discovering little things that are happening in his life that he realizes he's not who he thought he was. And so like a lot of us, we begin to struggle with our identities. And so we begin to search out answers to those questions. And so Moses began to do that, and that's where it happens in Exodus chapter 2, verses 11 through 15. He actually killed one of his own to protect a Hebrew, an Israelite. And so he begins to flee out of guilt and fear that if he gets caught, he too will be killed. And so what does he do in that time is until something special happens in his life, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but he encounters God in an incredible way, right? The burning bush, and he starts a whole new life because of this encounter with God, and that guilt he's set free from that guilt. And now let's fast forward to where I want to spend time on, and that's where I want to focus on the word perseverance, because I really feel like Moses was so key at perseverance, and we can learn so much from him. But it's important to know this. When the Israelites first got to Egypt, when they were brought there as slaves, if you study that story, when they first got there, 430 years prior to this, there was only 70 of them, they say. Fast forward 430 years later, when they're in the desert and Moses is leading them, they say there was over 2 million Israelites. That's a huge jump, right? Imagine us going from this amount to 2 million people. That'd be a pretty big church, right? We would need a bigger building, I think, or a lot of services for the whole week. So here they are. Moses is leading 2 million people with lack of resources, no promise to exactly when the future is going to come with this promised land. Most of them feel lost. They feel homeless. They're scared. Some of them are probably hurting. This life, God is providing along the way, but it's not easy. He provides light with the fire. You can read all about it in early Numbers. He provides manna from the sky to help feed them. So tons and tons of bread. Who likes eating bread 24/7, huh? Yep, me too. I love pizza. So here in Numbers 11, the Israelites begin to do what a lot of us are guilty of, what I'm guilty of, is after a certain amount of time, you begin to lack faith. You begin to say to yourself, well, goodness gracious, when is this going to happen for us? When is this next block going to fall in our life to get us to the promised land? So what do? They begin to cry out to their leaders, to Moses, we're sick of bread. We want meat. We're hungry. And so Moses listens, and what Moses does best is he hangs out with God. And I talked about that about a month or two ago when we were listening to the whisper of God. So here's Moses, and here's why I love using Moses as the example of faithfulness, because God literally says in Numbers chapter 12, verse 7, and he's referring to Moses when he says he. This is God speaking. He is faithful. When God tells you you're faithful, that's pretty incredible, right? Who here loves compliments at work? When your boss or someone tells you, hey, you're doing a great job, you feel good about yourself, right? You feel like, man, I can keep going. I'm doing it. Imagine God literally telling you, you are incredible. This guy right here, this gal right here, she is faithful. And that's what Moses experienced. And that happened in Numbers 12, where his siblings began to not trust. They felt like, why is Moses always the one calling the shots? And this is what happened. That's why God comes down and speaks to, you can read about it, to his brother and his sister, and he tells them, this guy is faithful. And then if you fast forward in the story of chapter 12, you'll see that 24 verses 30. So like a lot of leaders, a lot of what you want to call them interns or people who looked up to him, future leaders, and that guy was named Joshua. And I talked about last week how we forget sometimes that the enemy doesn't just use our weaknesses, they uses our strength to attack us. And so in this moment, Moses is having a conversation with God in verses 24 through 30 about the need for more than just bread for his people because they were becoming disgruntled. And that's when God says, okay, here's what you're going to do. I'm going to bring you what you want, but you need to gather your leaders to get the word out. So then Moses brings his 70 soul leaders that help oversee this community of 1 million people to begin to cry out to God, and the Holy Spirit talks about literally comes down and begins to speak to these leaders. And unfortunately, at this time of encounter with God and the Spirit, 2 important leaders missed the ship for some reason. They didn't get to the meeting. It doesn't say why, it doesn't say where they were. But in 24 through 30, it talks about how those 2 men, wherever they were at that time, The same time those other 68 men were exposed with this spirit of this prophecy of, hey, we're going to go and we're going to tell our people about what God's about to do. They were now feeling refueled, re-energized. These two in that exact moment were filled with the Spirit as well. And word began to spread about these two prophesying on their own. And Joshua being this young leader who's like, hey, Moses is my guy. I got to protect him. I am loyal. I am faithful to him. So he tells Moses, Moses, you have to stop this. You are the one that's supposed to be doing this. You are the one that people are supposed to be looking up to. And Moses' response is incredible. He literally says, all the Lord's people, I want to should encounter the Spirit. I hope for them to encounter the Spirit. That's the whole point. It's not just for one person, it's for everyone. It reminds you of the New Testament, right? It reminds you of the book of Acts. When it's not just for the Jews, it's not just for the people that we get along with, it's for everyone. The Spirit is for everyone. So then fast forward into Numbers 13, and I remember sharing this story a long time ago, but it talks about when Moses knew that they were getting close to the promised land and they found Canaan and they were like, we got to send some people ahead. We think we found it. There's this land with everything we would need, everything we would want. This is where we can call home. And so he sends his trusted spies into this community to check it all out. And he was expecting when they came back that they would be just ecstatic and they'd all be on the same page. And unfortunately, after one conversation and the next conversation, it turned into a very negative feedback. Oh, we can't go there. There are bigger armies than us. They have bigger soldiers than us. They'll defeat us. The land isn't, no, that's not what we need. And then it transformed into the whole community, not just the spies. It talks about in Numbers 14, 1 through 9, the whole community of the Israelites started grumbling to the point where they wanted to return to slavery. They were fed up with this Moses leader and this journey they were on, and they were more willing to go back to Egypt and become a slave. That, to me, is not the definition of being faithful. And then it gets worse. In Numbers 14, verses 10, Moses literally experienced death threats from the people that he was leading. And then in Numbers 16, it only gets worse. A mutiny breaks out from all of his tribal leaders to get him out of his seat of leadership. And here's why I break all that down from Numbers 11 through 16. It's a lot. But here's the important thing to catch, is that the Israelites lost all faith. They began to trust other things or themselves more than to trusting the one true God. They lacked trust, they were no longer dependable, and they lost their focus. But here's the coolest thing about this story. In the midst of all of these crises, one after the other, Moses stayed faithful to his call, and he stayed faithful to his God. And here's why. Because Moses caught what Paul in the New Testament was trying to get these new churches that were being planted all over to catch. And that's this. This is Paul's words in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7. This is the only race worth running. I've run hard right to the finish. Believed all the way. That's one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible. If I could have my tombstone someday, I want it to say that. That this was the only race I ran. That this was the only race that was worth running. And I believed all the way. That's my prayer for my daughter and my next daughter, is that they can believe all the way. You see, through crisis, through turmoil, through things that maybe we can't always explain, we know this. It's so simple, but here's the truth. God can be trusted when hope and faith seem shattered. when you seem lost in that desert and it just doesn't seem like anything's going your way, it just seems like one crisis keeps coming after the next in your life, know that God can be trusted. Hope and faith are not far away. And here's why Paul talks about the importance of finishing the race strong and why Moses stayed faithful throughout all that turmoil. Again, Paul's words in another letter, 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 23 and 24. He says this, "May your whole spirit, soul, and body be kept blameless. The one who calls you is faithful." Now, there are two things I want you to catch there. The word blameless. Everyone knows blameless can mean a bunch of different things, perfection, being perfect, right? And we all know right now being perfect is not going to happen in our lives. That we are going to mess up. We are going to sin. We're going to fall short. And unfortunately, with those things comes guilt. And I want to bring it back to guilt, like we talked about in the beginning, because when we truly begin to believe that we are forgiven, you know what the opposite of guilt is? Faith. So faith takes the place of guilt. And Paul's message, Moses' message was, we are free. Know that. Believe that. Let that guilt go. Whatever crisis you've experienced, whatever sin has happened, know that you are forgiven and you don't have to live guiltless anymore. You can live blameless because of one thing. And it's one thing that we're going to celebrate like crazy in just a few weeks, and that is the cross. It's as simple as that. We are blameless. We are guiltless, not because we are perfect, but because he was. And because that's how powerful the cross is. And once we truly believe and we live that out, here's what happens. The race becomes worth it. We run harder than we ever thought we could run before. And we finish. We become people who finish. So it's easy to say all those things, right? It's easy for me to say, hey, just finish. Hey, just believe. Hey, just let go of that guilt. Hey, just know that, yes, you are blameless because you have his blood running through your veins because of the cross and the sacrifice that Jesus made for us. So how do we finish? How do we sustain our faith like Moses did? Like Paul did throughout the crisis that brought his life. And we could talk for hours about the crisis that Paul went through over and over, the imprisonments, the missionary journeys, the failed launches, the failed leaders, the corruption. Not on his part, but people he was trying to lead. But Paul finished. And when I really break down, man, how do you remain faithful? How do I live out faithfulness in my life every single day? It comes back to one word for me, and that's gratitude. And here's why I believe gratitude helps us sustain faithfulness in our lives. Because again, if you fast forward to another book in the New Testament that Paul wrote, the book of Romans, chapter 16. Here he is writing this letter to Rome. While being in prison, let me remind you, some of you guys may realize that. He could have been in Corinth or outside of Corinth at this time. He wasn't in Rome. But here he is on house arrest. And his final message to Rome, to all the leaders, to the church, was so powerful to me because if you look at the first chapter to chapter 16, guess what he does? Right out the gate, Paul's words are words of thanks to 24 names listed. And those names carry over to the very end of chapter 16 in Romans. He thanks people. Why is that so powerful? Because in a moment where it's crisis after crisis for him, he realizes, I'm going to be filled with gratitude, which is going to sustain the faith that I have for Jesus and the mission that we're on. And he lets these people know, he literally lists out their names, men, women, all who helped his ministry succeed and become what it had become. And he begins to let them know how grateful he was in their faithfulness in running the race with him, believing all the way with him. That this man, Jesus, who was man in flesh, but God at the same time, who walked this earth, faced the same things that we face today, that they saw live it out, he was all in on that. He believed the whole way through chaos and crisis. So I am a big believer that sustainability for faithfulness starts with gratitude. Something as simple as that. That when we are thankful, it keeps our heart facing out instead of facing in. When we have eyes that are always looking out, we forget about all the pettiness that's going on with ourselves, and we stop feeling bad for ourselves, and we begin to feel for others. So here's my challenge for us today. Obviously, I would love for all of us to develop a heart of faithfulness. Let that spirit live out in your life, in your families, in your homes, in your neighborhoods, in your workplaces, in your schools, wherever you spend your time. But I want to simplify it today by inviting you to 3 or 4 different things. And the first one is this. I challenge you this week to do 2 simple things for me at morning and at night. And that's when you get up in the morning, whenever you spend time with God, that's great, morning or night, or at lunch, whatever you do that. But in morning and night, if you can specifically do 2 things for me. When you first get up, on a notepad or a sticky note or a journal or on your phone, I don't care how you do it, but just write out 3 things that you're grateful for. Just 3. Write them out. I am grateful for a beautiful day. I am grateful for a group of people who call Blue Ridge home. I am grateful for our kids team who are investing in the next generation. I am grateful for the worship band who spends the early mornings here and midweek practicing so they can create an environment where we can discover Jesus in a life-changing way. I'm thankful for the team that drives that trailer every single week, different people. Dustin did it today, who come and help set up. I'm thankful for all these people who run sound. It's real easy. And when you start thinking that way, your heart changes. Like I get excited just thinking about it because I'm no longer thinking about myself. My faith begins to I want to be a part of that. And then before you go to bed, I challenge you to do it again. What happened that day that you're grateful for? It could be a 1 line. You don't have to write like a 10,000 word essay, and I'm not going to give you my paper to cheat off of. Because that's a horrible thing to do, Blue Bridge 56. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Evan. And the second one is this. I challenge you this week, sometime, just once, to go to this website called ICommitToPray.com. And here's why. I believe a big part of faithfulness is about eyes out, not eyes in, right? And this website is going to expose you to the world of what it means to follow Jesus. And what I mean by that is it's going to share stories of people all across the globe who love Jesus and are being persecuted for it. So the Carousel of Dreams has been so good to us. But here we are in a public venue talking about Jesus, and there is no risk whatsoever of us getting in trouble for it. I'm not going to jail for this, at least, maybe for plagiarizing. I'm not going to jail for speaking about Jesus. You're not going to jail for being here. But let me tell you about 16 people whose lives are just transformed 3 days ago in a country that is undisclosed because they can't release it for the safety of the community. In another country, 3 days ago, 16 people said yes to Jesus. That's stinking awesome. In a place they don't know who Jesus is. That gets me excited. 4 people decided to go to that community and say, we want Jesus to be known here. Guess where those 4 people are today? They're in jail. and they have families, and they have spouses. And here's the coolest part about this story. Their families, through the underground spy world of the Christian world, through these people on this website who I want to know because they're real life Christian spies. It's my dream. Yeah, it's a real deal, Carrie. Yeah. They are asking for prayers, obviously, to get their spouse back, no doubt. But bigger than that, you know what they want prayer for? What they're asking people to go on this website and actually type it out, the prayer that they will get to see. They are praying that 16 will turn to 32. That 32 will turn to 64. That if they have to go to jail for it, it's worth it. It's worth it. The worship team can come on up. That's powerful to me. So I challenge you, go to ICommitToPray.com. Sign up, it's free. They can let you know by email. You'll get a newsletter once a month where we'll show you a bunch of stories of people who are being persecuted and how you can pray for them. And you can even log in and pray through putting them on. It's almost like a wall of prayers. It's really neat. Or you can have it text to you, however you want. But here's the last couple I want to share with you too is we're 2 weeks out from Easter, right? April 1st. I love that Easter's on April Fools. That's so cool. I mean, think of all the jokes, right? Yep. Yeah. But here's the cool thing. Before April 1st, it's March 31st, yeah? Can you guys do that with me? You guys know your days, okay? And I think we're going to have a slide for it. But something really cool is happening here on these grounds. Like I already told you how good the Carousel of Dreams is to us. They provide the coffee, the donuts. They give us breakfast twice a year, which is so cool. I mean, they go above and beyond for us, and we're so grateful for them. And so here's how we want to serve them, because they serve us every single week. On March 31st, from 9 a.m. to 12, they're asking that we come out in full force and help them lay eggs for all the crazy fights that are going to happen with the kids. I talked about this last week. I'm teaching Vale a lot of cool moves. Jeremy, if you can teach her some wrestling moves, that'd be great between now and next week. Thank you. So if you could come out, all hands on deck, help lay out eggs. Just be here. Shake hands with people. Welcome them. We're going to have a table, and we're going to have little handouts to talk about Blue Bridge Church. And you know what the coolest thing about it is? We get to point to this building and say, hey, you should come to Blue Bridge tomorrow. We're going to be having church. It's going to be a blast. We'd love to have you. We literally point to where we have church. That's so cool to me. So we'd love to have you come out March 31st, be the hands of Jesus in a very fun and unique way, and just give back to the Carousel for all they do for us. And like I talked about last week, continue to pray for that person that's going to fill these empty seats in 2 weeks. Now, my biggest thing is just duplicate yourself. If everyone did that, think how much this room's going to grow so quickly. Who is that one person that needs this chair more than anyone ever has? That one person right now who's at home and feels lost, feels ashamed, feels like nobody cares, or that, what's church anyways? Because I would rather have that person in that chair than somebody that goes to a church down the block. That's no knock on that church down the block. I don't know who it is. But what I'm saying is I want to see people who don't know Jesus in these chairs, because that's who needs it more than anyone in this whole world. So keep praying for that person. And also, you can invite them to the eggs. What do you call it? Eggs? I don't know. It's called Easter egg hunt. There you go. You know, the Bugs Bunny or we'll be there maybe. I don't know. So here's what I want to do next. I talked about it earlier. To me, faithfulness means a lot of different words, and one of them is generosity. And so I'm going to challenge you in a way that, a lot of people don't feel comfortable maybe being challenged this way, but I challenge you today to begin to pray about your financials. And here's what I mean by that. So a big part of being faithful is trusting God with everything in your life. It's easy for me to sit up here and talk, I'm going to be honest. It's easy. It's not easy to give up my time And it's not easy to give up my finances for God's kingdom, because that takes planning, that takes energy, and it takes sacrifice. Those are all roots of faithfulness. And so, like always today, what we're going to do is we're going to, take our tithes and offerings. But I challenge you this week, go home, pray with your spouse about, hey, when was the last time we really talked about how much we give? Because the reality is God's kingdom is worth it. This mission that Paul talks about is worth it. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to pray. Your buckets are on, well, there's buckets on this aisle over here, and there's buckets right here. There's multiple ways to give here at Blue Bridge. We've talked about it many times, online, texting, the envelopes. But if you ever want to talk to somebody, too, about giving, we would love to sit down with you and talk through that and what it means in our lives and what we do as well, if you have more questions about that. But I'm going to pray. And when I pray, I'm going to share something very special to me. But I also, when I pray, I want you guys to close your eyes as the worship team begins to play after I pray, and really begin to think about the crisis that you're facing in your life, or the sin that is holding you back in your life from being completely faithful to God in your relationship. And just let it go. My daughter loves that song. It's like 8 years out to date, But just to begin to pray that it's gone. I am blameless because of the cross. And because of that, I can be faithful. So let's pray. Father, I just thank you for a place that we get to come, speak about you freely, and there's no persecution. I pray for those 4 leaders, and you know exactly where they are. You know exactly what they're feeling right now, God. And I pray, more than importantly, you begin to encourage them with your Spirit, that the fruits of the Spirit will begin to live through them. I pray that their families will feel safe, and that number of 16 will turn to 32, and that 32 will turn to 64. And I also pray the same thing for Blue Bridge here today. For everybody here, they can begin to think of that person that they want to bring here in 2 weeks, or even next week. They don't have to wait for Easter to do something cool. But more importantly, God, I just pray for their lives where they feel guilt, and it just won't leave, for whatever reason that may be. And I pray that today they can visualize the cross as their eyes are closed right now, and your Spirit will begin to cleanse them out with a blameless joy, a guiltless joy, a faithless joy, one that will last forever. We love you, Jesus. We trust you with our story, with our families, and just where we go next. In your name I pray. Amen.